It was around 3:30 a.m. on November 15, 2023. I was sitting on my living room couch, half watching Grown-Ups, trying to unwind after a long, exhausting day. The house was quiet, too quiet, like the walls themselves are holding their breath. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the faint creak of the building settling, even the soft sound of my own breathing. And then I heard it. Breathing, slow, deliberate, just outside my front door. I froze mid-bite of popcorn, my stomach dropping into my knees. I tried to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe a neighbor, maybe a stray animal. But then the doorknob started turning, slowly, at first barely noticeable, like a whisper. Then it twisted with more force, and the door began to push open. My chest constricted. My heart slammed against my rib cage as if it wanted to break free. I didn't hesitate. I bolted upstairs, my knife in hand, the one I keep in the TV drawer for moments exactly like this. Every step felt heavy, slow, even as my adrenaline surged. My mind raced with possibilities, none of them comforting. What if they broke the glass? What if someone entered the house while I was unarmed? I live in a low-income area, in a small 2-story loft with no security cameras. My upstairs doesn't even have a door. It's an open area, completely exposed. There was nowhere to hide. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, whispering frantically. "Someone's outside my house, trying to break in," I told the operator, my voice trembling despite my best effort to stay quiet. The doorknob continued to scrape and twist below me. Every sound of the door, every little push against its frame, made me flinch. The operator stayed calm, telling me that the police were on their way, but minutes felt like hours. I could hear the faint scrape of the door, the push, the subtle shift in the air. My body was taut with fear, every sense on overdrive. The sounds didn't stop. At one point, I thought I heard a footstep, or maybe it was my imagination. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end. My mind jumped to every worst-case scenario. An armed intruder, a crazy person, someone who had been watching me. I didn't know. I only knew that I felt completely vulnerable, trapped in my own home. Finally, the noises ceased, or at least paused. I stayed upstairs, eyes darting to the window, peering out into the darkness. The street outside was empty, silent, normal, or so it seemed. I wanted to breathe, but even then, I couldn't relax. Every shadow, every movement outside sent a jolt of fear through me. 20 minutes later, the cops arrived. Blue and red lights flashed across the walls of my loft. I ran downstairs to meet them, hands shaking, knife still in hand. They asked if I was on drugs. I assured them I was completely sober. I had been at a basketball game earlier, hadn't smoked or done anything. Drank lightly maybe 3 times a week. My body shook too much for them to see that this fear was real. They did a perimeter check, shrugged, and left. And their suggestion? Don't stay in the house that night and try to get a good look at the intruder next time. I wanted to scream. How could they not understand? I was right there. Adam Sandler was still on TV. Someone had tried to get in. Someone had been right there in my house. After the cops left, my body went into full panic mode. My chest heaved, my hands trembled. I fainted from the intensity of the adrenaline, the shock, the fear. It was like my body couldn't process what had just happened. I didn't sleep all night. I stayed in the dark, replaying every scrape of the knob, every push of the door, every breath I thought I had heard outside. Every little sound, real or imagined, became magnified in my mind. By morning, I forced myself outside. The yard was a mess, trash was scattered everywhere, probably knocked over by stray cats. But no sign of anyone breaking in. The house looked normal, silent, empty. And yet, I couldn't shake the memory of the door, the knob, the deliberate breathing. I've been staying at my mom's house for the past couple of days. I haven't slept more than 46 hours. I'm a relatively happy, lonely 23-year-old guy. But my mental health isn't perfect. I've never been diagnosed with anything, but this experience has shaken me to my core. Could it have been a hallucination? Am I imagining things? Maybe, but the fear was real, and so was the threat I felt. I keep replaying it over and over. Someone tried to break into my home. They could have gotten in if I hadn't locked the door in time. The thought of what might have happened if I were asleep distracted, or unarmed is terrifying. My home, the one place I should feel safest, suddenly felt exposed, unsafe, and fragile. And I'll never forget that sound. The breathing outside my door, the turning of the knob, the push of the door, the terrifying thought that someone or something was just inches away from stepping inside my home. I'll be on edge for a long time, and every time I hear a creak, every time a door moves, my mind goes right back to that night. The night someone tried to break into my house at 3 a.m. The first knock came at 2 a.m. By the third, I realized we weren't alone. So my story begins a few years ago. In the fall or early winter of 2019, we were staying with my husband's father. We had rented a house and were planning to move in permanently a couple of months later. But at the time this happened, we had been there less than a week. I slept in the living room on an air mattress with our 3 children, ages 10, 5, and 18 months, snuggled close. The house itself was strange in its design. The kitchen, dining room, and living room were all part of one wide open space. A counter divided the kitchen from the living area, a sort of makeshift bar with a sink on the kitchen side. My father-in-law never used it for sitting. He kept the sofa pressed right up against it. The kitchen side had storage for dishes and all sorts of odds and ends. On either side of the counter, there were 4 or 5 feet of empty space, creating this awkward open gap that made the living area feel unusually exposed. Along the wall directly opposite the front door were 3 doors. First, my father-in-law's bedroom, then the bathroom, then a small spare room. My husband slept on the tiny spare bed. His father kept his bedroom door closed almost always, and there was usually a TV on in the room, plus either a space heater, window AC unit, or at least a fan humming somewhere. I don't remember whether my husband had his door open or closed that night. The rest of the house was all windows. Floor-to-ceiling glass ran along the front, and sliding windows stretched along each side wall. The house had originally been built as a sort of getaway cabin, designed to let in light in the view. My father-in-law disagreed with that design and was in the process of building a front porch, planning to replace about half of the windows with walls. At this point, the porch was still under construction, and the windows remained as they had been, large, tall, and completely transparent. It was the kind of place where you felt connected to the outside even when you were inside, and at the same time, completely exposed, with no way to tell who might be lurking outside. That night, I lay on the air mattress, holding the youngest child, with the older 2 on either side. We had all been asleep for hours when I woke up. I didn't know why, I just felt alert, uneasy, almost like my body was sensing something I couldn't see. The house was mostly quiet. The occasional hum of the heater or the soft whir of the fan was the only background noise. Everyone else was asleep. I lay there listening to the subtle creaks of the house settling, trying to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe it was just one of those nights, a normal sleep cycle thing. I was about to drift back off when it happened. A knock, not a frantic banging, not a desperate pounding, a clear, deliberate knock on the front door. My heart skipped. I didn't move. I lay there frozen, gripping the small child in my arms. The door was across the living room, on the other side of the counter. I didn't want to get up. I didn't want to leave my children exposed or wake anyone. It was cold outside, cozy and warm inside, and it wasn't even my house. The knock came again and again, each time slow and controlled, echoing faintly in the open space. My chest tightened. No one called out. No phone rang. The air felt heavy. I didn't want to look, didn't want to move, but I couldn't stop my ears from straining toward the sound. Then I heard footsteps, someone walking on the unfinished porch. Tools and boards had been stacked against the house, yet these steps were careful, deliberate. No clatters, no thuds, just the sound of someone moving around the construction materials with awareness. Precision. My stomach twisted, and I felt a chill crawl up my spine. The night suddenly seemed darker, the air heavier, the shadows sharper. Then started tapping. A slow, deliberate tapping at the window nearest to the air mattress. Floor-to-ceiling glass, and no way to see who was outside. The tapping was steady, almost ritualistic, echoing faintly off the walls. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The sound seemed to stretch time itself, each tap echoing in the hollow quiet of the night. My stomach knotted. My pulse thrummed in my ears. The children shifted slightly in their sleep but didn't wake. The house was silent except for the tapping and the distant creak of the old building. Each tap slow, deliberate, like someone counting or measuring. The rhythm grew in my mind until it felt almost alive, watching me, mocking me. I wanted to scream, but the thought of waking my children kept me frozen. I pressed the toddler closer to my chest, whispering in my head for them to stay asleep, to not stir. Finally, the tapping stopped. My body relaxed for a fraction of a second, too short to truly feel safe. Then footsteps moved again, away from the window across the porch. And that's when I heard it, walking across sheets of tin. I know that sound. I know it perfectly. And I know beyond any shadow of a doubt what I didn't realize until morning. The only sheets of tin on the porch were already installed as a roof over the porch. There were no loose sheets anywhere near the stacked boards or tools. The only way anyone could have walked there, the only way they could have made that noise, was if they had climbed up onto the roof itself, walked along the tin, and then jumped or swung back down to the porch edge. Even now, every time I think about it, it terrifies me. The idea of someone or something moving across that roof, unseen, outside the clear, exposed windows where we slept, it makes my skin crawl. The silence after the tapping was just as heavy as the sound itself, filling the house with a sense of dread I couldn't shake. And that's why I'm writing this now. Perhaps that's also why, just as I type this, an owl let out a long, chilling, un-owl-like cry before settling back into its usual eerie coos. It's as if the night itself remembers. I'm a male, 26 years old, and this happened around 3 years ago, when the US was practically recovering from COVID. I used to live in Long Island, New York, and that's where this story unfolds. It's one of those places that feels familiar and safe, the kind of suburban stretch where everyone knows everyone, or at least thinks they do. But that night, that illusion of safety was completely shattered. A little context. For those who didn't grow up in New York, there's a massive railroad system that connects nearly every town to the city, stretching all the way up to Manhattan. When I took a business opportunity in the city, I had no choice but to rely on it daily. I'd wake up before sunrise around 5:30 a.m. to catch the 6 a.m. train, and some nights I wouldn't get home until close to 11 p.m. It was exhausting, grueling, and at times monotonous, but the routine was steady, predictable. Before this job, I'd rarely been on the train during those late hours. And as I quickly realized, the late-night crowd was almost always the same. The same faces, the same brief nods or tired smiles exchanged, all people going to work and coming home. There was comfort in that predictability. You could almost set your watch by the way the cars moved and the people moved with them. New faces were rare, and I found a strange reassurance in that. Then one night, that routine was broken. It was winter, around 10 or 11 p.m., dark and bitterly cold outside. I had sprinted to catch the train, out of breath, heart racing not just from exertion, but from the biting wind that whipped my face. The car was packed, of course, as it always was at that hour, but instead of finding a seat, I ended up standing by the doors. Two men my age were talking nearby, laughing quietly, leaning slightly on the poles. I nodded at them politely, and then I noticed him. He was different in a way that immediately set my nerves on edge. A man in his late 50s, balding, gray hair peeking out in thin strands. He wore a Hawaiian shirt, slightly unbuttoned, khakis, and a belt that looked just a little too tight for his frame. A yellowed business key card was clipped to his pocket on a retractable wire. But it wasn't the clothes or the age, it was his presence, his eyes. They were deep-set, downturned, almost mournful, with a strange, pouting expression that gave him a permanently sorrowful look. And yet, when the two younger men laughed at something one of them said, he joined in, loudly, unnaturally, almost aggressively. He wasn't part of the conversation, but he was absorbing it as if trying to internalize their joy for himself. It was off. I watched him without meaning to. Something in the way he examined the two men, lingering just a beat too long on their faces, made my stomach knot. His gaze wasn't casual. It was deliberate, calculated, almost predatory in the quietest way. I didn't move. I didn't want to, but the train ride stretched on, and the more I observed him, the more I realized how out of place he was. Normally, details like this fade from memory, but his mannerisms were impossible to forget. And the way he tilted his head slightly, the way he subtly mirrored their movements, the way his mouth stayed in that faint pout while his eyes darted, scanning. It was uncanny. When their stop finally arrived, he followed them out for a few steps, but then he saw me. My heart nearly stopped. For a split second, something in his expression changed. His sorrowful eyes lit up with what could only be described as pure joy. Childlike, unrestrained. The kind of happiness you see in someone who's gotten exactly what they've been waiting for. And then, he froze. He didn't step off the train. He didn't move. It was like he was rooted to the spot, concrete binding his feet to the floor. That's when I knew, in a bone-deep way, that he would follow me. I didn't panic. At least, I tried not to. I'm a fairly big guy, not easily intimidated, but this wasn't about size or strength. This was about intentions. The way he had looked at me, joyful yet deliberate, made me certain he wasn't just another harmless late-night traveler. When my stop came, he followed. Not close, not yet, but enough. I stepped onto the platform and began walking at a normal pace. Not fast, not slow, just regular. I kept my headphones in, music loud enough to mask the sounds around me but not completely blocking my awareness. And there he was, matching my pace. It was unnatural, almost mechanical, the way he kept the same distance, always slightly behind but never letting me out of sight. I thought of every possible escape, but my options were limited. No stores were open, no taxis, no one was around. The street was nearly deserted, cold wind cutting through the dark night. The hill leading up to my house loomed ahead, a small incline, but enough that I hoped it would slow him down. As I approached it, I quickened my pace, subtly, almost testing him, and he kept up, matching me step for step, stride for stride, as if he had been planning this exact route all along. At the bottom of the hill, I sprinted. Adrenaline surged through my veins like fire. I didn't stop until I reached my backyard fence. Throwing myself over it in one smooth motion, I landed in darkness, crouching low, heart hammering, barely daring to breathe. My back door was a sliding door, locked from the inside, so my only choice was to wait, to hide. And wait I did. Through the fence slats, under the dim glow of a streetlight, I watched him. He climbed the hill slowly, scanning the street, looking for any sign of me. Then I saw it. His eyes. Gone was the sorrow, gone was the childlike joy. Now there was rage, cold, seething, calculated rage. He lingered for what felt like hours, pacing under the light, before finally disappearing into the night. The next day, I called the police and filed a report. I also changed my commuting routine completely. Instead of taking the direct route, I hopped from train to train, 3 or 4 times, hoping he would continue on the main line and I could avoid him entirely. I never saw him again. But the story didn't end there. I changed my routine forever. I became hyper-aware of every unfamiliar face, every lingering gaze. Even now, years later, when I'm alone at night, waiting for a train, or walking down a quiet street, I still check over my shoulder. And sometimes, just sometimes, I swear I feel those eyes on me, hidden in the dark, watching, waiting. Because some people are out there, and you will never know what's behind their eyes. Do you want me to do that next? And that's a wrap for today's video. I hope you enjoyed these chilling stories. If you did, don't forget to drop a comment with your favorite one, hit that like button, and subscribe for more spine-tingling tales coming your way. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.